Hi, this is Tim Morton from FrostGiant Studios. We asked Reddit and our newsletter subscribers to submit questions for us to do an AMA, or an Ask Me Anything. And in this video, you're going to see answers from various FrostGiant team members to those questions. Thanks to everybody who participated and submitted questions online. Lord Chafood asks, how much until we can see some important updates like game setting, engine, or factions? We did announce some details of the engine that we're working with Unreal Engine 5, but we haven't revealed any of the creative details about the game yet. We're going to do an official game announcement in the year ahead, so hang in there, but we're not quite ready yet. Hazi Khan asks, what does a one-year-old game project look like, whether at the artistic level, playability, design, or engineering? We set out to build a gray box or a white box prototype, which means that we're focused not so much on the artistic aspects, because we know Unreal Engine is capable of depicting great graphics. We're much more focused on the mechanics of getting real-time strategy stood up in what is traditionally a shooter engine, and there are definitely some architectural challenges there that we've been working through. And then also figuring out how do we adapt RTS as we know it to our vision for the future and experimenting with that. So what we've got, it's very crude. It is reminiscent in some ways of what you would imagine the basics for an RTS in terms of unit selection, in terms of simple command cards and combat, but it's focused not so much on the graphics and much more on the core functionality and on the core mechanics. Alpha Drake asks, have you decided how your game will be distributed? Steam, Epic, your own launcher? We haven't made any hard decisions yet because we're so early in the development process, but we definitely got feedback that players don't appreciate store exclusives, so we'll take that feedback into consideration. At the end of the day, we just want to get our game in front of as many players as possible, and we'll be exploring the best platform or platforms to do that. Blazing Dragon 1737 asks, will you guys be reaching out to Warchief Gaming and Notorious Studios or any other gaming companies that have been made by previous Blizzard employees or gamers? We do keep in touch with a lot of our former colleagues, including Second Dinner, Bonfire Studios, Warchief Gaming, and Notorious, who are literally in the same building with us, just sitting in an office upstairs. We have the closest relationship with Dreamhaven, who are advising on our game. Many of the team members at Dreamhaven were involved in building the original Warcraft and Starcraft RTSs, and it's super helpful for us to have the benefit of their perspective.
All right, so this question comes from OMG Abaddon. What are your plans to improve accessibility without casualizing the game? We really believe that the next step for the RTS genre to really have a breakout, incredibly successful game and potentially live up to the possibility of having a number one game in the world is to be able to satisfy core players at the same time as bringing in a lot of new players who can enjoy the game also. So this is important. We really want accessibility, but we don't want to casualize the game. And so that's why I like this question. It goes to the core of what we're trying to figure out. And the first part is on-ramping. We've talked about this a little bit in other interviews or discussions that have been shared with the community, but bringing in new users to the game in a way that does not intimidate them, that does not make them feel dumb because they're new players, and that lets them experience the fun of RTS and socially interact with their friends, even though they may be at very different skill levels. There's also a big question about approachability and pacing with how players are presented with new or complex aspects to the game. It's not about avoiding complexity, it's about pacing it and really presenting it to players in the right sequence, in the right manner, so that they don't balk at that complexity. They can ingest it, they can process it, and they can learn at a smooth pace that helps them feel good for learning and mastering incremental steps of complexity. And the third big part that we're looking at is really our gameplay modes. We're looking at co-op and different ways that co-op can be expressed, skirmish modes and arcade modes that we can build that will really bring players into gameplay sessions that are less intimidating, less stressful, maybe more social with teammates around them, and ones that would provide a positive experience even when they lose. None of that is at the expense of competitive, because that is also very important to us, but specifically for new users, it's important to have modes that are not intimidating, so they feel like they can they can take that first step, they can try their hand at this game, and then build up confidence. And the next question is from Nihilysis. And the question says, are you planning on making it a traditional, fully finished and done released product, kind of think like Age of Empires 4, or are you considering early access as an option as well? The game that we're making is one that we are going to actively support in big ways for years to come. We're really focused on delivering the best possible launch product, but we're already laying the groundwork on planning for what's going to come out year 1, year 2, year 5 after launch. In terms of your question about fully finished and done or early access, that's a bit of a blurred line. It is really important to us that we get feedback from players, feedback from the community on the game that we're building early enough so that we can actually react to that feedback before the game really goes full scale live, whatever that's called. All right. So this question is from Terrence Malik's Hat. Okay. And it asks, are you closely following the release of AoE 4 this week to see how well it's received and to see any interesting new features that it might have to inspire a next-gen RTS? We are fans of this genre, first before we are developers of it. And we also believe that great ideas, great inspiration can come from anywhere. And so it's really important for us to be seeing how the genre evolves and seeing what players are responding to well about it. And so, yeah, we've played a ton of AoE 4 specifically because that's the one that you're asking about. And I think that Microsoft and World's Edge and Relic I think they've done a fantastic job on it. People hear this, I encourage you to go play Age of Empires 4 and check it out. It's really a well-made game, and it's providing a bunch of inspiration to us, and we hope to continue carrying that torch further with our game.
So my question is from Gosu Enron. Gosu asks, you've chosen a path where you keep the community in the loop from even before you had an office. How does this affect your work? And are you feeling added pressure because of it? Will it affect the game itself? I'm asking because I'm very excited for what you guys will come up with, but the high expectation also makes the fall harder. I guess I'm just interested in whether you've discussed this before deciding to keep such a close relationship to the community. And to be clear, I really appreciate that you do it this way. We had really amazing relationships with the RTS community from our previous games that we worked on. And we've always thought that the community that we had, the RTS community, was a very smart community. It's a very proactive community. There are challenges, of course, in doing what we did in involving the community from the launch of the studio itself before we even had a game. One of the repercussions of that is that people may have the impression that we're not acting on the feedback that they're giving to us. In fact, we are digesting that and thinking about it and organizing it at the same time that we're doing a lot of infrastructure building. You know, when we started the studio, we didn't have a game engine. We've done a deal with Unreal, but we've also had to add a lot of tooling on top of that before we could even begin to design the game. So I'm sure from the outside that's felt like there's been no exciting news coming out of the studio. But in fact, behind the scenes, we're working very hard to build things. One of the reasons we did choose to announce the studio and the game so early is we wanted the community to know that RTS is not dead, that there is a strong group of developers that are very interested in taking it forward into the future, and to let people know that they should get involved and that they can contribute to what that future vision is going to look like.
A question from Wraith Hosts. Do you have a problem to make an art style that is clear and good looking at the same time? And is it harder to design big units and buildings or smaller objects, small units, workers in an RTS game? It's pretty straightforward to make stuff look good in Unreal. The engine is super powerful. The shaders are amazing. The lighting, animation we can do. There's a lot. lot we can do there to make stuff look good. The challenging part on our end is we can put so much into the game that it could get noisy, and we want to make sure that we keep the units to have a nice clean read in the game. You know what you're looking at instantly, and it's not competing with the background, with what's happening in the terrain or the lighting and animations that are happening there. So that's where we can put so much into a game now that we need to restrain ourselves to some extent. And the second part is about the size of the units. Is something easier or harder? I would say making bigger units is somewhat more difficult because we need to create them in a way that looks like other units can't, unless it's by design, pass through them. So if we have a big unit, let's say with their feet spread really far apart, we need to make sure it doesn't look like the smaller units can go around and in between that if it's not intentional. So that's the challenge I would say there is for larger units. And also making them look comparatively large in scale, but we can do a lot of that with detailing. Example, if you have a building and you put smaller windows on it, the building instantly looks bigger compared to than if you have lots of bigger windows on it, it'll make it look smaller. So there's lots of art techniques that we can use to change how the scale of something feels in the game. This question is from statistician number 2666, and the question is, in terms of art style, what do you aim to have your game look like, and why would you pick it? Is there any particular strength you seek to stress or aim behind it, or is it simply stylistic? For our game, we want it to be... Unreal is capable of doing like lots of photoreal stuff, but we want to add our own style to what our game is going to be. So harness the power of the engine, the lighting, the materials, the animation, stuff like that. But we want to make our own style of game. We want players to be able to see a screenshot of our game and know instantly this is a FrostGiant title. And so that's kind of the main goal that we are driving as an art team is determining what is our style, what is our look, but then still using the power of the engine.
Dan Riley CG asks a multi-part question, but the first one is, even though many of you are from Blizzard, are you guys interested in any mechanics from the Command & Conquer series? Our primary inspiration is Blizzard RTSs, but we are definitely looking at Command & Conquer, Age of Empires, Company Heroes, and even more, and trying to see what makes sense for our game and seeing what fits. The next question he asks, are any of you former game designers from the Command & Conquer series? Tim Campbell, he's our game director. He worked on Red Alert 2, and it has very, very fond memories of the Red Alert franchise, as all of us do. I worked on multiple series of the Command & Conquer, Red Alert, and also the original Tiberian Wars. And on top of that, Tim Morton, our production director, also worked on the Command & Conquer series. The next question is from Hazi Khan. How many employees are working at FrostGiant, and how many do you plan to add before the release of the game? As we speak, we have 22 full-time employees here, an additional 10 that are contract. We plan to get at least double that size, give or take 50, when the game is released. Creates a more collaborative team, keeping it slightly smaller, which does lead into the next question from Kevin Mulbeck. Are you accepting any interns at this time? I can say on the marketing side, we do, and we are. On the development side, we are considering that for the future, so you'll have to stay tuned.
Little Demon asks, I have an engineering question. Are you using an existing game engine, or are you building your own from scratch? We're using Unreal 5 with a custom game simulation that runs within Unreal. And as a follow-up, he asks, what's your approach to ensuring that all players see the same game state, given that there could be possibly hundreds of unit interactions every second? It seems like a difficult problem. It is a difficult problem, and we do that by creating our own custom game simulation that runs deterministically, which means that every computer runs exactly the same way and produces the same results for any given player's input. It's kind of like playing a game of chess or checkers over the phone with a friend and just telling them what your moves are. Fluffy McGrew asks, what's the most exciting thing on the technical side that you couldn't do with StarCraft 2 or Warcraft 3 that you can now? The most exciting thing for me is that we've completely separated the game simulation logic from the rendering that we do with Unreal 5. This allows us to have faster frame rates, a smoother simulation experience, and better support for replays and spectating, among other interesting possibilities.
Alpha SE2 asks, after your game releases, are you planning to organize or sponsor your own tournaments, or even run a professional league like StarCraft 2's World Championship Series? Or are you planning to have a more community-driven tournament scene instead? Great question, Alpha, thank you. It's our belief that all successful esports ecosystems have really been built on the foundation of what the community authentically enjoys, so we're going to start by focusing on that. Our current approach is for tournaments and esports to be enjoyable and rewarding for players of all skill levels, regardless of how much they've invested into the game so far. So our goal is really to have a clear overarching esports ecosystem that sustainably layers professional tournaments alongside those always-on grassroots activity that everyone can participate in. This process doesn't just start after the game releases. We're really excited to be building all these plans and activities alongside the core game development, so we're able to incorporate the thoughts and desires of everyone in the community to create something that we all can really love.
So, Food Guy asks a three-parter. Part 1. What is your design philosophy when it comes to creating units? How much do you value unit design based on their lore, balance, and overall funness? Like, what are the most important considerations when you design a unit? So this question is about unit design in general, and the answer to that, I would say, is it depends. So I'll give you a few examples. When we were working on co-op commanders in the StarCraft 2 universe, we had a lot of deep and rich lore to base these characters off of. So what we did as a team is we went into a room, we jotted adjectives of what describes these co-op commanders. So for example, Mix, he's known for dictatorship and subjugation and nuclear holocaust. And then we designed units and mechanics for this commander that really fit this fantasy. An alternate way to design units is what I imagine the Legacy of the Void team did with the Ravager unit in the Versus mode. So with that unit, the team, I believe, really wanted to break apart Roach Death Balls in the ZBZ matchup and give Zerg players an opportunity for counterplay against Force Fields in the ZVP matchup. So with the design of that unit, mechanics were really prioritized, and the lore was built later on in order to fit that fantasy. In terms of balance versus fun versus how interesting a unit is, we really want to prioritize fun and interestingness from the get-go, with some balance considerations mixed in. And the main thing we want to consider with balance is not how balanced is the unit currently, because we can always tweak numbers, but rather we want to consider how difficult it would be to balance the unit later on. Part 2 of this question, in terms of designing a unit, is it one guy that designs everything, or is it multiple people? How do you settle on the final design for the unit if 5 guys have 5 different views on a unit? And I think in terms of designing units, it's no different from designing levels, designing systems like ladder systems or progression systems, in that generally there is one owner and the design team surrounding that person. And it's up to the owner to define the goals of what they're trying to do with this unit, with this level, with this system, and then take ideas from the entire team, build consensus with the team to finalize what this unit or level is, and then it's their responsibility to make the calls. When designing a unit, do you start off with one path and iterate until it feels right? Or do you start with 100 ideas and narrow it down? So I would say in the ideation phase, when you're just jotting down ideas for units, yeah, we kind of do a shotgun approach where we come with all these ideas for what this unit could potentially do. But after that phase, when we start the prototyping phase, when we actually try to make these units, put these units into our game, we eventually narrow down all these ideas into just one thing that we want to try. And that's mainly for time reasons. We can't just spend like all our time implementing 100 different units. So why don't we just try one, see how it feels. If it kind of works, then we iterate on that unit. And if it doesn't work, maybe we scrap that and try one of the other ideas.
All right, so this question comes to us from Subsurian. Subsurian asks, while of course it's too early to talk specifics on the story and universe, what sort of lessons and focuses from Blizzard's storytelling and world building are you all taking in when designing this new setting? So certainly we are learning things always from the way Blizzard was telling a story. And for an RTS, when you have multiple factions, that can be tricky. You're fighting one faction in one campaign, and then in the next campaign, you might be that faction. And so you're going to be fighting, potentially the faction that you were just playing. And so in that sense, you don't want one faction to always be the enemy. So certainly, looking back at Warcraft, for instance, the Warcraft RTS, how orcs started off being the major villain, but then as you start to play orcs, you find that the orcs have compelling characters and they have their own compelling storyline. When you're playing that faction, you want to feel like the hero, and that's really important. So all of these factions, in an RTS game, you need to feel like you are the hero when you're playing those factions. Our next question comes from Sue Warrior. Sue Warrior would like to know, can we at least get a hint to the type of setting and world you have envisioned? Imagine aliens that arrive in these craft that look like giant vacuum cleaners, specifically like the old Kirby vacuum cleaners from like the 20s to the 40s. So this alien race just comes in and just starts sucking up everything with these vacuum. They're sucking up hamsters, they're sucking up gerbils, they're sucking up mongoose. So we think it's going to be very compelling, and we're very excited to explore this storyline. And I'm very happy that I had the chance to share it with all of you today. So thank you.